But today it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Sigelman, who's the CEO of Burning Glass Technologies. And Matt is here to deliver a presentation on the skills most in demand in scientific and engineering positions, and also on how non-traditional certifications may better align education and training with the needs of employers. With that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carla, and thank you to everyone at MassBio for the fantastic work this organization does. I'm Matt Sigelman. I'm the CEO of Burning Glass Technologies, and I'm pleased to provide a view of how the COVID economy affects the world of biotech and of pharmaceuticals based on sort of the unique insights that we have, the unique vantage points that we have at Burning Glass on this question, which is from our work applying the world of big data to understanding the job market. We go and collect millions of job postings every day, study hundreds of millions of people's careers, and in all cases sort of translate everything to a common language of skills and of types of jobs at a great deal of granularity, so we can understand what's going on both here in Massachusetts, nationally, and how some of the trends that are happening in other sectors are intersecting the world of biotech. Excuse me. So first of all, I wanted to start with a set of just data. Well, we do collect a lot of data about the job market. By the way, one other quick note, I'll mention you'll note email address here. Glad to share this presentation. Feel free to email me and be glad to send it along. So first of all, what we already know, there's been a huge decline in the job market over the last 3 months or so. Since the start of the COVID epidemic. There's an old song that says when you reach rock bottom, there's 2 ways to go, straight up and sideways. We're not quite back to straight up, but we are glad to report that there's been 4 consecutive weeks of improved job postings and increased job posting activities. There's some life coming back, some of that in manufacturing. Now, that said, and here's the less positive news, one of the things that's been of significant concern to me as I've been analyzing the job posting activity in the market has been to understand what's going on in the world of what kinds of jobs are down by how much. And you can see overall hiring activity is down 42%, which is unprecedented since the start of the crisis. But we're seeing a broad range of roles that are involved in R&D and product development, which are actually have dropped in activity far, in some cases, significantly more rapidly than we're seeing for the market in general. These are jobs like software engineers, chemical technicians, natural sciences managers, the list goes on. It's also a very unusual recession for a bunch of reasons, but this one's quite surprising. We're used to, if you go back to, for example, the Great Recession or other recessions before it, typically the impact is really most deeply felt by people who are in roles that are non-college roles. The kinds of professional roles, science-based roles and the like have typically been spared. If you look at the Great Recession, even in the depths of the Great Recession, most of sort of the unemployment rate and hiring rates had actually not changed that much for college-level jobs. And here we're seeing actually a little bit the opposite. That unemployment insurance claims are higher for people without a college degree, but in terms of postings, which is an indicator of future shape of the economy, just like that, hiring for innovation jobs isn't about the jobs that are happening today. It's about what we're going to produce a year from now by hire a medical scientist or a chemical chemist or a biologist or whatever. These are things that are going to affect a pipeline of products into the future, and the same thing here suggests that there could be some significant challenges, particularly for those who are first making entry into the job market. You can see that for fresh college graduates, for jobs looking for a college degree, not a lot of experience. Actually, posting levels are down almost 60%. So going to really challenge people and could lead to a lost generation of people who wind up on the sidelines. Now, as much as all of, we can see all these very negative trends, it is worth bearing in mind that there are a range of roles that are PhD level roles that conversely are doing a lot better than the market. These are roles like technical writers, like engineering managers, statisticians, software developers, and the like that are asking for PhD. Those kinds of roles have been relatively sheltered. What I think is worth mentioning, though, is this, and biotech overall, in fact, has enjoyed a relatively privileged position in the fallout of this pandemic, and it's not surprising given the incredible importance of the role of the world of biotech and pharmaceutical industry in general in addressing this pandemic and the needs of potential future pandemics. And so what you're seeing here, you can see that R&D outside of biotech is falling in much higher rates than what we're seeing actually for biotech itself. So differences between 42% fall off in higher activity in biotech versus 79% for other parts of R&D. And you can see that's likewise bearing out in improvements in the biotech sector over the last month versus the rest of the R&D spectrum continuing to fall in terms of hiring. So the question is this. We'll show in a minute that biotech actually has a very important role to play in the kinds of key trends, the key secular trends that are likely to drive recovery in the economy. So how then do we make sure that there's sufficient talent being brought into the world of biotech? So first of all, just to talk briefly about where we see some of the key trends that are going to drive the economy. Certainly we think about in the post-COVID world, a readiness economy. Thomas Friedman's New York Times talks a lot about events like COVID not being black swan events, but actually being black elephant events. That is, they were the elephant in the room that everyone was ignoring, and now, of course, we can't. A readiness economy will be making greater investments in biotech and greater investments in the readiness of our healthcare system and other kinds of infrastructure. And, of course, biotech will play a very important role there. A growing amount of work as well in the remote economy, but a diversified economy. And as an advanced manufacturing sector, the biotech sector has, will be very important in the movement to onshore businesses to do more things stateside. And so we can expect to see some of the trends that have happened, moving some of those jobs away from places like Massachusetts, moving back. And then finally, an automation economy. We think that's another trend that across advanced manufacturing sectors, certainly, but a range of others, certainly lab research, where we're going to see greater and greater levels of automation that are going to impact. So the question is then, is there enough talent to make this happen? Now, first of all, it's worth bearing in mind that already, even before this crisis, there were some significant sets of skills gaps. It's just looking at a few pharmaceutical companies and the demand that they've had for a number of within their chemical engineering roles is just an example. The demand that they've had for some fast emerging skill sets that typically weren't part of chemical engineering. And you can see the kind of pay premiums that those kinds of skills command. So this is a good sign that there are real shortages for some of the kind of emerging skills in the market. At the same time, we also know that there are significant premiums for sets of human skills that people in the life sciences haven't always necessarily accrued. You can see that engineers who have business analysis skills get about $10,000 premium. We have to pay about $10,000 more for those with project management or sales or budgeting skills. So some of those key business skills also have come to be significant pressure points for the industry. Now, it's important to realize that part of what restricts supply in the world of life sciences is that we have a very different footprint of what our demand looks like. So you can see on the right what a chemical engineer in the semiconductor industry looks like, and on the left are the kind of skills that are required, not because we think so, but because that's what employers articulate. Again, across the millions of job postings that we collect every day. And then what that same role looks like in the biotech and pharmaceutical industries. And you can see in orange are called out sets of skills that are distinct to the sector. You can see there's quite a bit of distinctive material that says that we're looking for a different footprint. So we're restricting our supply because we can't just hire any old chemical engineer. Part then of being able to, and here's just another example, by the way, that's not just in the scientists themselves, but biotech firms, even in things like regulatory talent. You can see a bunch of, on the left is just overall regulatory affairs people across the whole market, and the right, regulatory affairs skills required for those roles in biotech. As you can see, there's a bunch of industry-specific knowledge, process-specific knowledge, of lab-specific knowledge that we're imposing there, which again restricts supply. Also importantly is making sure that people have the kind of foundation skills. This is an analysis that we did for the Business Higher Education Forum looking at what are the foundational skills for 21st century work. So it turns out that, in fact, the kinds of roles that we're hiring for in the world of life sciences actually have first of all, had a very significantly growing demand for these kind of foundational skills. You can see, for example, among environmental engineers, there's been a quadrupling over the last decade of demand for jobs that are asking for significant collaboration skills, very significant changes in demand for communication skills, leadership skills, mentoring skills. All that says that in a world that is where we're doing increasingly sophisticated work, increasingly team-based work, and cross-functional work, these kinds of human skills, which haven't always been part of curricula, are increasingly coming to be in demand and therefore pain points as we develop a talent supply into the industry. So where I want to finish up here is on this notion of how we can solve this. One of the ways that we can solve this is, I know that's a broader topic for discussion today. We're about to turn over to a panel to talk about how we can get talent from other markets. But one of the other things that we need to make sure of is we think about would a certification ecosystem for the world of biotech help us out? And here is, by the way, just finishing up on the theme of human skills, you can see here that in addition to the fact these are growing significantly, when you compare roles in biotech and pharma with those outside of it, even the same role, in this case a project manager, significantly higher demand within the world of life sciences than outside. So as we think about certifications, the key then is how do we isolate the specific skills that qualify somebody who might have been working outside of the sector for work in this sector. Here's an example of a statistician. What would she need to learn in order to become a biostatistician? She'd need to develop mostly the same skills you might imagine, but she'd need to develop knowledge of clinical trials, clinical development, clinical study reports. Can we isolate that set of skills and credential it in order to be able to channel more people from across sectors to be able to move and have credibility to apply for jobs in the world of biotech? As we think about that, and again, I think it's going to be true across a set of spheres. Here's project managers, and you can see both project managers overall and then the specific needs that they'd have if they're coming out of a hospital context. But we also need to realize that those credentials need to be developed around specific transitions. Here's an example of mechanical engineers. Certainly a lot of mechanical engineers hired in the world of life sciences. A mechanical engineer coming out of a general context, for example, would need to pick up MATLAB, systems engineering, biotech, understanding systems design. One coming out of aircraft has a very different set of gaps that she would need to bridge. And so the question then becomes, how do we make sure that those credentials are specific enough to give people credibility? One last thought here is that in a lot of cases there are existing credentials that we can leverage. This is the example of somebody who is a lab tech, and as we know, it's surprisingly difficult to find lab techs who are well qualified. If you compare a lab tech in biotech versus lab techs in general context or hospital context, really there's a lot of skill overlap, and CGMP is good manufacturing processes, understanding, and certification is something that already exists off the shelf and can facilitate that kind of transition. One note of caution here, the world of, it's easy to say, wow, we can create a whole universe of credentials that will help us to expand the talent pipeline into the sector. What we know from our research overall, we track demand for thousands of credentials out there, thousands of certifications. And what we know of them is that 90% of jobs that ask for a certification ask for one of the top 200 out of thousands and thousands. And 2/3 ask for one of the top 50. So there's a whole long tail of credentials that exist out there that just don't get a lot of traction. So if we're going to create credentials, it could be a great solution for talent shortage that we've already experienced and potentially a greater shortage that may exist as we expand the universe of talent into in a post-COVID recovery. We need to make sure that we're doing the heavy lifting to make sure that industry comes along, that we are developing credentials that are going to become part of how the companies who are members of this consortium are going to hire. When we can do that, we can create an ecosystem of talent that is skill-based and that brings, that widens the universe, widens the pipeline, and brings people in. Again, I'd be delighted to send this presentation to anyone who has questions, and it's been such a pleasure.